Hi everyone, you're here starting with Cody, and in today's video we are working with the number 10D foot, which is also the same as the number 10 and number 10C. So before we take a closer look, always remember to subscribe to the channel and like this video if you found it helpful. So now let's take a closer look at our most used foot, the number 10D. So the number 10 foot is, like I mentioned, our most used foot. There are so many different things you can do with that foot, and we're going to cover a few of them in this video, and there will be a part 2 to this video because there are so many things. So if we look at the number 10 foot, this is the number 10D. So the biggest characteristic with this foot, or the characteristic with this foot, is this metal guide, this strong, sturdy, stationary metal center guide. And that is the key to this foot. That's what makes it different from any of the other feet. And so unlike the number 5 foot, which I've talked about in previous videos, which is our blind hem stitch foot, this guide stops before it would reach the needle in the stitching area. The number 5, because it is a blind hem, comes all the way to the back. So this foot allows you to do anything your number 1 foot will allow you to do, because there's no restriction, because there's nothing blocking that opening. So some of the things that we do with our number 10 foot is pin tucks. So we can easily make some nice pretty tucks, have them nice and consistent, and we can change how much or how big of a tuck that's created. So I made this small little pillow just as a sample to show you some of the different tucks. And the spacing is determined by your markings, how far apart you mark the fabric and fold on that marking. Something else we can do with the number 10, it is great for inserting lace or inserting a ribbon. And that's something we're going to also do in this video. But there are many other things that I do with the number 10D foot, such as edge stitching, which I can show in another video. I do that constantly when construction, any type of garment, or doing some hemming. Stitching in the ditch, which is huge. Absolutely huge. This is the best foot to use for a lot of the stitching and ditch projects, because you can use that nice robust 9mm stitch width. Attaching ribbon, like I mentioned before. You can even do corded edges, cross tucks, which is really cool. So it's very similar to this. I've got a sample somewhere. It's very similar to this, except you do this and then you do it the other way. So you have kind of like a cross hatch, but within tucks. It's great for, like I mentioned, inserting lace, creating entredeaux. The list just goes on and on and on. If you look at your big book of feet, you'll see the many pages and the whole chart that goes over all the different all the different stitches and techniques you can use with this foot, and what to adjust your stitch width, your stitch length, and your needle position to when working with the number 10 foot. So let's take a closer look. So what we have here, this is just a little sample. So if we wanted to create the tucks that we see in the pillow, what we do here is we equally measure and draw a line, say like an inch, inch and a half, depending on how far you want them to be. And so you draw a line, typically with something that's going to go away with heat, not something that you want that would go away with water, because we want to hit it with the iron. So once we draw our lines, then we're going to go to the iron and we're going to press them. So we're going to press them down like this. So I did use a pin because I wanted my students to be able to see the line and keep the lines there. But you typically would use like a heat away, like a friction pin. So once we have these folded, we can take one by one. So what we're going to do, we've got the number 10D foot on. So the only thing we really tell the machine is we're going to move the needle position. So we're going to move the needle position over to the left. And depending on how deep or how long of a tuck will depend on how far you move the needle over. So we can just move our needle position over, we're going to say 3 spaces. Now this is something that varies with a 5.5 and a 9.5mm stitch width machine. 3 spaces over for a 9.5 or 9mm stitch width machine like the 770 is significantly wider than 3 spaces over for a 5.5mm. So this is where you kind of would have to play with it. So typically, so if we want to get a similar spacing, a similar distance on a 5.5mm stitch width Bernina, we would maybe want to move it over 4 or 5 spaces to get what we're going to see with this 3 space. So what we're going to do is we're going to ride this fold right along the inside edge or the left side edge of that guide. So as we can see here, we just ride right up against the guide and we're just going to stitch. It's as simple as that. So now we're going to do the other two and we'll see our end result. So now that we've stitched all three, we can see all these three tucks here. And so all you do is you take them to the iron and you just press them down. And then you will end up with essentially this result. So if we wanted this to be deeper, you just move your needle over more. And if you wanted these spacings to be wider, you would just draw your lines wider. Plain and simple. So you can really take plain fabric and you could do a different color thread, an alternating thread to really complement your fabric. If you wanted to create a whole new kind of textured fabric, like pillows or anything, quilt blocks, there's a lot of things you can do with that. So now if you want to insert some lace, it's just as simple. So here we have a piece of lace. And we can take the other side of our fabric. So if we wanted to insert lace right in here in this spot, what you do, you can draw a line again to show you where you want to insert that lace. And you're going to place your lace along that line. You're going to fold it over. So in this case, it'll be right sides together. And we want to make sure that our lace edge is right along that line that we drew, so we know everything's staying straight. And we just fold it over. Depending on your lace, you can press it. And then we're going to bring it right up to the guide, just like we did when we created our tucks, and we're going to stitch it down. So now we've got our lace nicely inserted. So depending on how you wanted your lace to be inserted, you could leave it so and press it so it would be loose at the bottom. But you can also do the same thing at the bottom. So you could, in this case we really can't because of our tuck, but fold the fabric down, stitch it again, and then that lace would be inserted right into our piece of fabric that we're working with. So something else that we really like to do, and this is one of the awesome features of this machine, is of this foot, is top stitching. This is what we use this machine for the this is what we use the foot for the most, and that's top stitching. So what we're going to do is we're just going to basically fold this fabric back and we're going to top stitch this down. So we're going to take our fabric, we're going to put this edge here, this white edge of the folded fabric that's stitched down right along the right side of that guide. So just like that. And now we're going to move our needle over to the right. So let's move it over so it's about a +2 in this case. And we're just going to stitch her down. So here's our top stitching. And so what that does is it lays it flat. You can see here's what the back looks like. And here's what the front looks like. Perfect, perfect top stitching. And that's another way you can stitch lace or ribbon down. So if we wanted to just stitch this ribbon down to our fabric and not really insert it, we could easily have just stitch, so it's open here. So we can easily just put the ribbon to the side of the guide that we're going to have our needle on. Like in this case, it's on the right side, and we can just stitch it down that way. And of course, whenever you're stitching any of this down, you want to make sure you're using thread that complements your fabric. So here it is. So now it's stitched all the way down. Just one of the many things you can do with this number 10 foot. So that'll be it for this video. We will have more things to do with the number 10D foot in another video. So stay tuned. But remember, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for the next part to the number 10 D foot. All right, and as always, happy sewing.